Good morning and welcome to Business Morning. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwagu. Thank you for joining us.
This is Channels Television's breaking news.
Our news just breaking says federal government has announced the reopening of National Youth Service Corps orientation camps nationwide for prospective Corps members on November 10, 2020. The decision comes after over 7 months of closure following the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to the Minister, Youth and Sports, Mr. Sunday Dari, full COVID-19 protocols will be enforced in the camps. And let's look at the September inflation numbers just released by the National Bureau of Statistics. The data shows inflation went up by 13.71% year-on-year in September. This is 0.49% points higher than the rate recorded in August 2020, which was 13.22%. Now, increases were recorded in all divisions that yielded the headline index. On a month-on-month basis, the headline index increased by 1.48% in September 2020. This is 0.14% rate higher than the rate recorded in August 2020. Now, the urban inflation rate increased by 14.31% year-on-year in September from 13.83% recorded in August, while the rural inflation rate increased by 13.14% in September from 12.65% in August. On a month-on-month basis, the urban index rose by 1.56% in September, up by 0.14% from 1.42% recorded in August, while the rural index also rose by 1.40% in September, up by 0.13% from the rate recorded in August. Then the composite food index rose by 16.66% in September compared to 16% in August. This rise in the food index was caused by increases in prices of bread and cereals, potatoes, yam, and other tubers, meat, fruit, vegetables, fats, and oil. On month-on-month basis, the food sub-index increased by 1.8% in September, up by 0.21% from 1.67% recorded in August. The all items less farm produce or core inflation, which excludes the prices of volatile agricultural produce, stood at 10.58% in September 2020, up by 0.06% when compared with 10.52% recorded in August 2020. On month-on-month basis, the core sub-index increased by 0.94% in September 2020. This was down by 0.11% when compared with 1.05% recorded in August 2020. The highest increases were recorded in prices of passenger transport by air, medical services, hospital services, pharmaceutical products, passenger transport by road, motor cars, vehicle spare parts, maintenance and repair of personal transport equipment, repair of furniture, and paramedical services. Well, we will discuss this further on our commodities market segment. In the meantime, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in a recent press release, blamed the customs service for the challenges currently faced by businesses in the Nigerian ports. LCCI laments that customs processes and procedures of clearing cargo at the ports is affecting economic recovery efforts and hurting investors, and says urgent interventions and reforms is needed. Well, this is coming at a time when trade facilitation has become key, even as African countries prepare for the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Let's get to hear from the National PRO of the Nigerian Customs Service, Mr. Joseph Atta. Thank you very much, Mr. Atta, for joining us on the program.
It's my pleasure. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, I'm sure you're aware of the recent lamentation by the LCCI on how the activities of the customs service is affecting businesses at the ports. The delays suffered by importers as a result of tedious customs processes. What is your reaction to that?
Yes, I'm aware. I think instead of the lamentation, attention should be turned inward, geared towards attitudinal change of some of their members, and indeed attitudinal change as it relates to stakeholders. What they call delays, what they call cumbersome processes has to do with essentially non-compliance. A situation where people appear to take power as a license to garbage in and garbage out. That is not what power is intended to achieve. The whole idea of power is to enable quick, smooth, and transparent clearance. These days, what we've been seeing is that people go to declare certain things and then bring things that are completely outside their declarations. People fill in some things in the bank, get the power, and when the physical examination is conducted, what is in the container are not exactly what had been declared. Shortly before I left the office this morning, I went to the power center and said they should give me some printouts. And it will interest you to know that there are situations where somebody will bring something in and then declare $9,000. And when we do due diligence, take a look at transactions, take a look at export declarations and other sales contracts, we discover that such things cannot be correct. And when we insist, the person will have no other choice than to come clean. From $9,000, you are now seeing $120,000. Look at the gap, 9 to 120,000, which means that without that intervention, a lot of money would have been lost. Now, I also had a printout given to me before I left the office, printout of declaration and assessment from the Power Ruling Center, where intervention raised declaration that was in the neighborhood of 597 million to 2,527 million, a difference of 1,929 million. The question is, who is wrong between the two? The person who did a faulty declaration or the person whose intervention had led to the increase in revenue collection to the purse of the federal government? That's what this is all about. When you do proper declaration, correct declaration, your documentations are correct, what you have declared is what you are bringing in, you will go smoothly. For every 2 or 3 people that are complaining, know that 4 or 5 compliant traders have come and gone without complaint.
Well, Mr. Tad, just as you noted that there are still a lot of them that are compliant. Of course, in every situation, you could have some kind of bad eggs. And you did talk about attitudinal change. Now, this attitudinal change, should it just be for these businesses, perhaps, those that are not doing the right thing? Or should it also include some of the customs officials who are probably, again, may not be doing the right thing?
Yes, I will not sit here and say all custom officers are angels. We do agree that with every organization, we do have some very few bad eggs. But the ongoing reforms in the service, which places premium on automation, have drastically cut down the opportunities for vices as it relates to our job. Mind you, most of these things, almost 90 to 95% processes are done online. So opportunities for some of those things that were done in the past are increasingly being shut down. But the other side of the bargain are the stakeholders who have continued to insist that things should be done the way it used to be. And that also gives reasons for the various checks, including the Federal Operation Unit, the Strike Force, the intelligence that they are complaining about. We are proving that we have the ability, the capacity to check ourselves. Any organization that does not have the capacity to cross-check itself is doomed to fail. Are we now suggesting that because you found one or two custom officers that are ready to compromise with you, to change the federal government, and you are able to escape the seaport, therefore you should not have it freely to your warehouse? The answer is no.
Now
it is through this intervention that investigation will lead to those who are found culpable and dealt with.
Now, Mr. Ta, you talked about automation. Now, if your system is very well automated there, I mean, it should be a seamless process. We shouldn't have these delays. We shouldn't have those who are doing their businesses genuinely suffer this kind of delay. So what is the use of the automation if people or businesses are still going through the same process that resulted to the automation of your system?
I tell you this, the whole essence of pre-arrival assessment report is for you to electronically transmit your documents, your declaration, which will be captured, presuming that what you have done are exactly correct and represent a true picture of what you will eventually bring. That is the essence of that. Now, once that is done, when the goods physically arrive and it is examined and found to be correct as declared, of course, it will go smoothly. You have no reason to be delayed. There will be no issue of delay. There will be no issue of all the incumbrances that people have been complaining about. But in a situation where what you had electronically transmitted to us and treated are at variance with the physical things that you have brought, that is where the delay comes in. That is where the checking comes in. That's where all those steps that are needed to be taken to protect economy and national security will be taken. So it's not the fault of the automation. It's the fault of the human element in it, the people who are going to bring what they have electronically declared.
Now, let's relate to specifics. Why is it that after a cargo has been cleared by customs at the ports, the same customs operatives will intercept the cargo on the road? Is it that those who release the cargo in the first place are not trustworthy?
First and foremost, I told you that any organization that does not have the capacity to cross-check itself is fraught to all sorts of crimes and criminalities. Now, we are not laying claim to the fact or to what people might want to ask, that whether every custom officer is a saint, every custom officer does something 100%. We are first and foremost human beings. And as human beings, we all have our DNA, just as our names are different, our characters are different, and all that. We do know that professional training can tend to bring people to reason and think and act in a particular way. But because we are human beings, subject to all sorts of elements and influences, we are saying that there are possibilities where a criminally minded stakeholder might also find a weak custom officer who is ready to compromise. The bigger question is, when you are lucky to find such an officer, should you be allowed to go scot-free with all sorts of grave consequences on national security and economy? I think it's all about patriotism. There's no any organization that will not put check and balances. Even in a family, you want to check your children. You want to ensure that the directives you're giving are carried out to the letter. And once they are not carried out, you melt out punishment to that child. So it's just a process. I think the answer to all this is compliance. Import what you have declared and pay appropriate duties and taxes.
Now, according to LCCI, importers interface with too many customs units, sometimes up to 10 or more. Can this number not be reduced?
Up to 10 or more? Mm-hmm. That will suggest that every custom officer is on the road. I do not think so. We have a joint examination bay at the seaport. We have the Federal Operation Unit who have the statutory function of interdicting and ensuring compliance. And then we have the Headquarters Strike Force who are not permanently on the road. They are activities are intelligence-driven, where they have credible information that certain things have beaten the command, have beaten the Federal Operation Unit. Their own is to swoop on that thing and intervene, and then arrest if possible. Those are the situations. And the intelligence unit, of course, they operate covertly. They are to provide intelligence. And there are situations where we even have patriotic Nigerians who may be privy to certain things that have happened in a hidden places. And then they provide such information to the Federal Operation Unit, who will just be on the chase and interdict.
Now, for some years now, the customs examine containers physically. Why is it so difficult to deploy scanners? I think it will make the examination easier, isn't it?
Yes, I agree with you that the inadequacy or the epileptic nature of the very few that we have been the bane of speedy examination. But thankfully, the federal government has taken appropriate action, has approved the e-customs, and the automation the full automation of the custom processes have just begun. And in the very near future, scanners will be installed at all, or if not almost all entry points. And that greatly will improve clearance process.
Now, importers who take their cargoes outside Lagos complain about several customs checkpoints along the road. What happened to the executive order that directed the removal of customs checkpoints on the road?
I've just told you that we have the Federal Operation Unit and the Strike Force. What these people, you see, we have three layers of security. The Area Command, those are the first set of people that you interface with, the Federal Operation Unit, and then the Strike Force. Now, the whole idea is that if you beat the command, you have the Federal Operation Unit to contend with. If for any reason you are able to beat these people, upon credible intelligence, the Strike Force will set out to interdict, to go to your warehouse or wherever you have stored these smuggled items and evacuate them, and if possible, make arrests. Those are the people we have.
All right, Mr. Tai, you talked about the fact that, I mean, what the Customs Service is doing is to ensure that you generate enough revenue for the country. And we know that revenue is a major challenge right now for the country. So how much would you say Nigerian customs have been able to generate in the past, let me give you 1 year, and are you meeting the target that you should actually churn out?
First and foremost, I will talk about the necessity for compliance and the necessity for duty payment. You see, the whole hue and cry about tariff, about structures, duplication of functions and all that is the reluctance of some of our stakeholders to pay appropriate duty and taxes. Now, if you have these same people are willing to go outside the country and part with hundreds of millions of naira and in some cases dollars to acquire state-of-the-art equipment or items and all that, they import these things into Nigeria. And when it is time to pay duty and taxes to our own country, it is like the proverbial camel passing through the eye of a needle than to pay duty in Nigeria. See, each time you pay duty, you are providing resources for government to build roads, build schools, build hospitals, provide quality drugs, so that the less privileged Nigerians can access these services by government. Now, talking about revenue and what the ongoing reform of the Comptroller General of Customs, Colonel Hamid Ibrahim Ali, retired, has been able to do. Time was when it was hard for us to get 3-4 million and all that. But with increasing automation, strict application of extant laws by the Tariff and Trade Department, and strategic redeployment of operatives, today we can say that on a daily basis, we make 7, 8, 9, sometimes even more daily billion naira to the coffers of the federal government. So revenue collection have continued to be on the increase because of the reform, because of the zero tolerance to non-compliance, because of the existence that extant laws governing import and export are obeyed.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Joseph Atta, for your time on the show.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
Joseph Atta is the National PRO of the Nigerian Customs Service. We take a break, and when we come back, we'll look at the domestic commodities market space. Do stay with us. And on commodities markets, we have Bolande Agbaje with me here in the studio. Good morning. I hope it wasn't difficult for you to get through that NSAS protest.
Well, it was a bit difficult, but we moved through. We pushed through.
We would always push through.
Yeah.
Anyway, headline inflation up 13.71%. FDC was actually predicting 13.56%.
Yes.
Yeah, you didn't get it this time around.
Well, it just means that, you know, our forecast for prices was obviously much higher than what we had anticipated. But I think the most important thing is the direction is still, you know, we're still in line with the direction. Well, we didn't see it coming this much, but it just means that, you know, the impact of like supply shortages to do with the floodings, the fact that, you know, the supply within the economy is still not at par with what the demand is saying. It shows that that has significant impact. And also the Forex issue as well, the fact that, you know, the CBN is still Forex rationing when it comes to, you know, meeting the demand for importers of those that they've been allowed, you know, to import regarding food inflation. I think food inflation was the major driver when it comes to meat, the tubers like yam, potatoes, meat in particular. What comes to our analysis is the fact that, you know, the Association of Maize Producers have complained that, you know, prices have remained high. Not necessarily complained, they're happy that prices have increased by about 60% from the pre-pandemic levels to the, you know, post-pandemic levels. And that just means that, you know, the way the CBN is trying to increase supply by, you know, allowing only 4 producers to import this particular product is not doing as much when it comes to, you know, meeting the demand. And also, you know, when it comes to meat production, which was highlighted in the report, it shows that, you know, as corn or maize is cost inputs when it comes to, you know, meat production, that has shown, you know, with the increase in prices when it comes to, you know.
Now, this rate of inflation, and again, particularly food inflation, 16.66%.
Yeah.
Does that give you a cause for worry? Because we're approaching the festive season.
Yes.
So it's possible. Is it possible it's going to go higher?
It's definitely going to go higher because, you know, we're in the era where, you know, we usually see higher inflation numbers, particularly food inflation. And coupled with this, we also have the protest-induced lockdowns, which would also add to, you know, the inflationary pressure. With the festive season, with all that, we expect that inflation numbers to, you know, spiral out of control, except the CBN comes in, you know, to reduce interest rates. And I don't think that would probably be happening anytime soon.
Now, okay, when we look at state profile there, Zamfara, Kogi, and Plateau recorded the highest rate, while Nasarawa, Lagos, Ondo recorded the slowest rise in food inflation. How would you explain that? Still tapped to the flood issue?
Yes, definitely the flood issues. You know, majority of these, particularly, you know, the tubers, the corn, like I mentioned earlier, they usually come from those areas, and definitely the impact will be felt most in those countries, and it also most in those states rather. And it also means that, you know, the governments within those states are not doing as much to curb higher prices. Whereas when you look at the likes of, you know, what's happening within Lagos, it seems like, you know, the prices are not, you know, moving as much within this central western part of Nigeria.
But looking at it month on month, 1.48% from 1.34%. What's responsible for that?
The month-on-month is definitely, like I mentioned, the food inflation is the major driver when it comes to, you know, the headline inflation. Then you also have the likes of, you know, the core inflation aspect of it as well, when it comes to air tickets and all that contribute to the core inflation part of it. But majority is the food inflation.
Yeah. Okay, now, with the way inflation numbers seem to be going down, we're at 13.71%. Are we likely to see inflation 15%, perhaps by the end of the year?
When thinking off the top of my head, I would expect if I'm trying to be realistic, I'll think it'll get to about 14%, even slightly above 14%, but I'm not so sure it would, reach the 15% levels. Well, if the central bank is actually watching what's going on and trying to make sure that they would taper those numbers down.
Okay, let's look at cocoa. That's another agri-commodity out there, the top there at your on your burning economic issues. Prices have recovered after 2 weeks fall. Well, that's good news for Nigeria, considering the fact that cocoa is actually Nigeria's major agri-commodity.
Yes, so with the potential output of about 300,000 tons that we expect, it's great. Cocoa is currently trading at about above $2,300 per ton, which is good news. I think the major driver was the increased demand in Cameroon. And that's, great for the fact that we're having issues with our forex is definitely going to support our forex supply as well. So, yes, we have high hopes for what cocoa will be doing in the next few months.
So, and then with our external reserves now dwindling,
yes.
Do you see that actually making much impact with what we're seeing now with the revenue from cocoa?
Well, I hope it will definitely have significant impact, but cocoa is not one of the major sources. Although if we have increased output, it should contribute more to our external reserves. But with the way the demand is going and the fact that foreign investors are pulling out, they're demanding for their dollars to in return, and the increased pressure from other sources as well, I don't expect that to, have significant impact on the reserves, at least for now.
On the other hand, Arabica coffee prices slips on stockpile demand. How much impact does that have for Nigeria? I know we drink a lot of coffee, but I don't know how much we produce.
Well, we drink a lot of coffee, but, a lot of people are on the healthier side of things. So I guess most people don't drink as much coffee anymore as they used to. We don't produce coffee, so the impact of that is still minimal. But yeah, with the demand as well and imported inflation, that also poses a risk.
Yeah. All right, yesterday, of course, the IMF reversed, or rather 2 days ago, the IMF reversed its growth forecast for Nigeria and, of course, the global economy. But, well, the outlook still looks very grim there with the resurgence of COVID-19 cases.
Yeah.
So what would all of these translate for commodities market, both domestic and international commodities market?
Yeah, so the IMF yesterday revised our growth forecast from contracting from 5.3% to 4.3%, which is great. I think from what I understood from their report is the fact that, it's driven by mobility. That was, the major factor they were looking at to, revise these numbers. The fact that there's increased economic activity within, some of these countries is why there's this reduce, although it's still contracting. And I think that's what to, more or less focus on. 2021 numbers expected to, reach 1.7%, which is positive. That's great. And I think one thing to take out of what they highlighted is the fact that oil exporting economies, as well as emerging and developing economies, are those that have been hit the hardest. And that's because, we're not equipped the way advanced economies are. And it's left for these advanced economies and international agencies to support some of these, countries like Nigeria. We have, the likes of the grants, the aids, the debt restructuring, and debt relief, which is what I believe Nigeria needs at the moment. The protesters are complaining, increase this, pay more, increase the salaries of the police force. Nigeria doesn't have the money to do that. So debt relief would come, it would be appreciated at
this morning I saw the IMF calling on governments to actually go borrowing.
Yes.
So, when we're talking about considering Nigeria's debt profile and, of course, a lot of other developing countries, Africa in particular, I'm just wondering how this would be a long-term solution to the present problem.
Well, yes, it would be a long-term solution in the sense that, at least for now, if you borrow to invest in the, lasting infrastructure, that should help build your economy. I think that's one thing we failed at in Nigeria. We usually borrow for recurrent expenditure, which is not great. It's not something that will build the economy in the long term. You invest in structural policies, education, infrastructure. Those are the things that will drive future growth. And that's obviously where the IMF is always coming from when it comes to, borrowing. You don't borrow for, expenditure.
To pay salaries.
Exactly.
Right. Okay, let's look at oil commodity there. We've seen Brent take up a little bit, $43 band. How much impact will China's recovery really have on oil prices going forward?
China's recovery is literally put a smile on my face. China is notorious for rebounding as much as, any other economy. I'm trying to be optimistic about the demand, Chinese demand, but I also think that, as much as we see a rebound in, the Chinese economy, I'm not so sure that the demand would, there'll be significant increase in demand for oil. The Chinese economy, as much as they're rebounding, they're also trying to, build the economy in such a way that they can stand alone and, be less dependent on other economies as well. The fact that, this COVID situation happened is already turning the heads of many countries as well. So I think it's like the OPEC I mentioned, they're very optimistic about the demand for oil and where it's going. The fact that, electric cars wouldn't, the demand for electric cars wouldn't, really offset, the demand for oil. And if that's where what their forecast is, then I guess the Chinese recovery is good news.
Right. Now, with OPEC Technical Committee meeting scheduled for Monday, what's the outlook for oil?
They will definitely look into, this new IMF report. I'm sure with the increasing supply from the U.S. Gulf of Mexico, from Libya, from Norway, they will definitely look at what to do with the supply glut that is building up and the stockpiles as well.
All right. Thank you very much, Bolande.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Bolande Agbaje. I was to say Olutosin. All right, it's still your name.
Yeah.
Bolande Agbaje is one of the research analysts with Financial Derivatives Company. And the central bank says it would apply strict sanctions on shipping companies who do not comply with the federal government's directive instructing all export goods to carry Nigerian export proceeds numbers. At a virtual meeting convened by the financial market regulator and attended by representatives of shipping lines in the country, the governor of the central bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, says an audit of shipping companies shows that several of them were not complying with the directive. Mr. Emefiele mentioned that a circular will be sent out to shipping lines and relevant agencies such as the Nigerian Shippers Council, the Ministry of Finance, Nigerian Customs Service, among others, to address some of the challenges faced by shippers regarding the NXP form. Okay, let's look at the equities market with Eddie Diong-Elwan. Eddie, good morning.
Good morning, Timmy. Well, the market, was unchanged yesterday. Now, during the day, we saw some gains, but then towards the end of the trading session, that was offset by some profit taking on some Tier 1 banking stocks. But then the market was unchanged. The all-share index was at 28,334.33 points, while the equity cap was at 14.815 trillion naira. Activity level was lower yesterday compared to Wednesday's session, as volume declined by about 59% to 218.42 million units. Value also declined by about 50% to 3.13 billion naira, and all of that was traded in 3,896 deals. Now, the sectoral chart was mostly positive yesterday. Unfortunately, all those gains were not, didn't have any impact on the all-share index. The banking index was up 0.46%. We saw gains from GT Bank, ETI, and Fidelity Bank. However, Access Bank, Zenith Bank, FBN Holdings, and FCMB all declined. So I'm sure those declines, was what held the market, the banking index down. Consumer goods was up 0.21%. We saw gains from PZ, Guinness, Cadbury, Dangote Sugar and Flour Mill. Industrial goods was up 0.15%, and that was all due to gains that we saw on Lafarge Africa. Insurance was up 0.67%. The oil and gas counter was the only counter that declined yesterday by 0.17%. 7%, and that was due to the losses on Adova. But let's talk to Tajuddin Olayinka, a stockbroker at Valmont Securities. Good morning, Mr. Olayinka. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning.
Well, the market was unchanged yesterday, and this is despite seeing gains from all the other counters. Why weren't those gains enough to have any impact on the index?
Well, the movement, the positive movement in prices before just more or less penny stocks. So those stocks are not strong enough to affect upward movement in the ASI.
So what do we expect from trading today? What do you expect trading to be like today and the rest of the week?
Well, since the big buyers are not coming up as expected, it is very likely that we will still see, a balanced market where you have takers taking advantage and bargain hunters also taking advantage. Both of them working in harmony. So we will see just price movement. It won't be, much of upward movement, and it won't be much of a decline. So we'll just see a balanced market.
A lot of companies have, released their notice for board meetings, and of course, we're expecting 3Q earnings soon. What are your expectations from these earnings?
It's positive. What we saw in half year was positive. So going forward, we expect those companies to also give us positive news. Also, movement around the economy, the economic variables actually, favoring, some of these companies. So we do not expect to see any negative result that will cause adverse movement in market prices.
Would we say that the bull run that we had seen in the market has ended already? I mean, some of these prices have gotten lower. Should we be expecting investors to also take position in these stocks again? And should we be expecting another bull run anytime soon?
Yeah, we expect them to take position because, that's what I said, bargain hunters will be there. Profit takers should be there. Those who bought long time ago and who are now spending profit will probably want to take profit. Who feel that this is the best time for them to come in, will also begin to come in and take advantage. So we'll see movement on both sides. Bargain hunters taking advantage. Also the profit takers taking advantage. Don't forget also that the major buyers are these PFAs, the pension companies. So because of the guidelines that is making it difficult for them to just jump from fixed income to equity, you will not see much movement from their side at this time. But you will see them come into the market gradually, just to take advantage of low prices. So we will see a balanced market support.
What are the opening calls in the market like? What's driving the market right now?
The market is still very flat. There is no much movement. So far, we still have a small, small decline of about 0.02%, and that is quite insignificant.
All right, Mr. Olayinka, thank you for your input on the program. Tajuddin Olayinka is a stockbroker at Valmont Securities Limited.
Thank you.
All right, we'll just continue with the other markets now before we go on the quick break. The unlisted securities market was yet unchanged again yesterday at 729.94 points, while the market cap was at 536.19 billion naira. But guess, Jimmy, we'll have to leave it there on the equities market for now.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we'll get back to you as soon as we come back from break. So we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about the markets. And, of course, that's after going to London. All right, just before we go to London, let's get a quick update from my colleague there at Lekki Tollgate on what the NSAS protesters are doing there. Olu, what's happening there at the Lekki Tollgate?
Business activity, formal and informal, is gradually, I hate to be a prophet of doom, but it's gradually grinding to a halt. Chibeze, look at this, for instance. We are standing on the Sandfield bus stop pedestrian bridge. This is Ozumba Mbadiwe on a Thursday business morning is as empty, deserted, and as dry as it can ever be. The only time we see Ozumbambadiwe like this is on a Saturday or on a Sunday or on a public holiday. Now, what has happened is either of these two, workers have stayed away or have simply not come to work with their vehicle. Ahead of me, which is like 500 meters away, is where the protesters are. They are meeting there, they're gathering momentum, they're spicing themselves up, they're prepping themselves for today's activity. Incidentally, every day they have what to do. What I hear them say today is that they're going to march and process through the streets and maybe hitting the business district area like Marina. And I do not want to think these guys want to hit, for instance, the stock exchange to shut that area down. But what I do see is a galvanizing army, a galvanizing force of young people who are not ready to back down as far as what they are demanding is concerned. And they've said to anybody who cares to listen, this is not about agitation, this is not about revolution, this is not about any fight. We're simply asking for the basic thing that should have been done long before now, and the hour to do that is now. So as you can see, if you're not doing the business they're doing right now, you're not doing any business right now on the island, as everywhere is this. We've seen some people or heard some people who have been speaking there early this morning saying they didn't go to work today and they have told their bosses, we are not coming to work because this is about young people and we need to find a place and a future for our young people. Chimeze.
This is really serious, and I hope the government will really do something about this. Thank you very much, Olu Phillips. There, continue to keep updating us on those developments there. Thank you. All right, let's move to the street of London for updates there. Juliana, good morning. All right, Juliana, let's begin with Brexit. What's the latest? The European Union is about to formally reject a UK plea for special allowances for exports of electric cars in a post-Brexit trade deal. What is the talk around this now?
Good morning, Chimese. I know we're short on time, but I've got to give you a bit of breaking news because this has just broken before I stepped into the studio. We've spoken quite extensively, haven't we, this week about these 3 tiers of lockdown. And now it's just been confirmed that London, the capital city of the United Kingdom, has just moved up a level. So we've moved up from the medium alert level to a high alert level. So there are new restrictions in place in London. Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, has just been giving a briefing about this. I thought I would mention this because, of course, this is going to have, for some devastating economic consequences, particularly in the hospitality industry. I'll discuss that much later, but that is important breaking news, which I will bring you. And, of course, as you were saying, Brexit, another deadline has passed. Today is October the 15th. Back in September, early September, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said if a deal was not reached by today, then there would be no deal. Today has come. There is no deal. The negotiations are still continuing. Yesterday, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson had a phone discussion with Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Council President, and also the Commission President, and Charles Michel, the Council President. UK PM not happy at all during that discussion. I was told is a little bit heated because he does believe, or UK believes, that the EU have been pretty slow in trying to beef up these negotiations. There are still so many contentious issues on both sides. I think the big ones are obviously fishing. The EU want to have access to the UK's abundant fishing waters, which hardline Brexiteers do not want, and also competition. The EU want to make sure that Britain still run a fair game when it comes to how they treat EU firms over their own firms. So there are major issues still at hand. There's a big EU summit taking place today and tomorrow. We are expecting some sort of statement to be made at the end of today, perhaps by the Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier. But, you know, we've been in this game for 3.5, almost 4 years. It's still dwindling on. The only difference is at the end of the year, it's legally binding that Britain will be leaving this transition period with or without a deal. And by the looks of things, a deal is becoming increasingly unlikely.
Well, you talked about those new restrictions there. Again, there are indications that quarantine period for travelers arriving in the UK is likely only to be cut to about a week under a test and release scheme being considered by the government task force. What do we know about this story?
What we know is that Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, he was speaking at some sort of remote aviation conference yesterday, and he did say that what the government are hoping is that they're going to scrap the 14-day isolation period for Brits who have holidayed abroad coming back into the UK, and he'll make it 7 days, and it could even be less than that, because what the government are proposing is that when you come back into Britain, you go home to self-isolate, and then 2 or 3 days later you can take a COVID test. If that test comes back negative, then you can be released. It's not as far as perhaps the aviation industry would like, but for the government, they believe that this is a concession. Lots of people, millions of people, believe it or not, left British shores and travelled during the summer holiday because there were a series of travel corridors made available. But as soon as the infections began to rise, one by one, these destinations were taken off the safe corridor, leaving hundreds of thousands of Brits stranded abroad because they couldn't get home. And so the travel industry have been asking the government to make it more simpler. Rather than taking it out on the entire nation, they should be testing people at airports. The issue that the Transport Secretary has is that sometimes you cannot catch COVID if you've only caught it the day before. So they are saying that they may perhaps try this new system, which will mean Brits who are desperate to get away again, because Brits do love their holidays, they may be able to get away for a Christmas break if they're lucky.
All right, Juliana, we'll leave it at that. And we hope to get more update on that breaking news there on new restriction laws later in the day on our afternoon show. And back here on the debt and currency market, we still have Eddie on board.
Thank you, Chimi. Well, Ijoma Onwukwe, a fixed income dealer at FSDH Merchants Bank, will be joining me to talk about the fixed income market. Good morning, Ijoma. Thank you for joining us on the program.
Good morning, again. Thanks for having me.
There was a primary market auction yesterday with a strong bid to cover ratio, and we saw rates at 1%, 1%, and 2% across all maturities. What was the turnout at the auction like, and really, how low can these rates go?
Okay, so we had, like you said, we had a 4.94 bid cover ratio yesterday. There's a lot of liquidity in the system, so demand was high and everything. So I think that's where everybody's channeling their funds to right now. So, but you asked me where it would.
I think we've lost Ijoma there. Well, there was a primary market auction yesterday, and the rates were even lower compared to the last primary market auction. But the bond market was bullish yesterday, as average yields declined by about 3 basis points across the curve. Now, on the long end of the curve, we saw declines on the April 2049 maturity. There were declines on the April 2029 and the March 2036 maturity. There were 36 deals on that counter worth 17.06 billion naira. The NTB market was also bullish yesterday, while the OMO market was quiet, as we saw no deals on that counter. Well, Chimi, just like Olu said, with the protesters marching, the good thing is that the markets, are still working offline, so we will still have good trading regardless of what happens.
Let's just hope so. Let's just hope so, because I know that if this continues, I must tell you, it will affect trading eventually. All right, let's leave it at that. And that's a wrap on the program. Thank you for watching. I'm Chimeze Obi Iwago.